Good evening and welcome everyone. My name is Yana Ovcharenko and I am an outreach coordinator here at Education USA Ukraine. I hope that you remember that Education USA is your official source on US higher education. And all services we provide are absolutely free. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us via email or signing up for the consultation. So, I think if you are here, you probably consider applying to the US universities, but maybe you feel a bit confused or unsure about different application platforms. Do not worry. Tonight, we are going to figure out how to do it properly. And we are lucky to have Justin Van Dyke with us, a big friend of Education USA Ukraine. I'm sure that you have already known him from our previous lectures. Justin is the representative of NYU Abu-Dabі. And as far as I know, he has over 10 years of experience working with students, schools, universities, and help students have a better understanding of US admission process. So Justin is going to walk us through the most common application platform as Common App. He's going to highlight its features and just explain how it works, how to avoid some common mistakes, and how to just fill in the platform in the best way. So, Justin, the floor is yours.
Great. Thanks so much for that wonderful introduction. Hi, everyone. It's wonderful to be back with Education USA and America House. It's always a pleasure to speak to you and give you information about this process. So today I'm going to give kind of a walkthrough of the common application and application platforms in general that we use to apply to US universities. And I guess I'll go ahead and start on with my slide deck. And I think the best place to start, as you mentioned before, I'm representing NYU, but NYU Abu-Dabі. And so talking about where we are is probably the thing that I should start at first, since it's the elephant in the room. It's New York University, but also in Abu-Dabі. And in fact, to make it more complicated, it's actually in quite a few other places. So what's unique about our institution, NYU, is that we're a global network. So when you apply as an undergraduate to NYU, you actually have three choices: the campus in New York City, the campus in Abu-Dabі, or the campus in Shanghai. These are kind of like the three motherships that you can apply to directly, but you can also spend time at these other campuses around the world. You can see that there's smaller academic centers in other cities in Europe, Latin America, even in Australia, other parts of the US. The idea behind this is that you can have this home campus and that you can study and get a US degree, study a US liberal arts and sciences curriculum, but do this on a global scale. So as we mentioned before, I'll be covering a number of different things today. I'll cover the initial steps to apply. This will really cover all US universities. These are the typical things that all US universities ask for when you're making an application for admission. I'll also specifically talk about the Common App, how to start the account, how to get your application started. And then I'll give you some additional tips on testing, so the standardized testing, also extracurriculars and activities. I'll give you some extra tips on the writing section. I know that's something that's really different. That's something that's not necessarily required for universities in other countries. I'll also talk about getting letters of recommendation for your application. And finally, I'll talk about the deadlines and that process. So to start us off, these are the steps for applying. First and foremost, you need to figure out how to apply to the US university you're applying to. Unlike the UK, there isn't just one single platform. There are a few big platforms. The Common App, the one that we'll be talking about today, is one of those, but there's also the Coalition for College Access. And then there's some universities just that have their own application themselves and even systems for specific states. But the material that they're asking for, these typical requirements, really will apply to all universities. Most US universities ask for this kind of information. So when you find information or when you find universities that you're interested in, your first step will to see actually how you submit that application. And then you'll begin gathering these materials. So most schools will ask for some kind of standardized test. These are things like SAT and ACT. They want your academic achievements. Typically, these are through your transcripts or your lists of grades. They also want to know what you're doing outside of school. So we want to hear about, sports or, arts, or really anything that you're doing outside of the class that can give us a bigger picture of who you are. We also would like a letter of recommendation or multiple letters of recommendation to get kind of an outside perspective, not hearing just from you, but also the people in your life around you. There are also often writing assignments, personal essays, and other essays. And some universities even require an interview. At NYU Abu-Dabí, for example, our interview is actually a whole weekend where we bring you to Abu-Dabí to get to know the university, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. And also application fees. Most universities have some kind of application fee in order to apply, but also many, including NYU, have waivers that you can request. If that fee would be a financial burden for you, you can ask for that to be waived. And I'll be talking about all of that today. So this is the front page of the Common Application website. So you go to commonapp.org and you'll create an account. And as soon as you do that, you're immediately confronted with a few different questions. You'll be asked whether you're a first-year student, so you're starting, for your very first year at this university, or you're a transfer student. That's saying maybe you're moving from another university and you'll be transferring what you've already learned in your credits from that university to the new one you're applying to. Or, for example, if we have any counselors or teachers who are listening to us this evening and want to see how this process goes, you can also sign up as a parent or an educational professional and create one of these accounts. So for you as a student, if it's your first year, you go ahead and click on First Year Student, and you will be met with this page. So this is your dashboard. This is where you can monitor all the things that are going on with your applications. You can see what parts are complete and the requirements from each university. You can also monitor the letters of recommendation and those things. So this is kind of your main hub. When you start the Common App, you will notice on the left, there's a field that says College Search. That's where you can type in the name of your university. For NYU, this is just New York University. No matter which campus you're applying to, you can type New York University, and then you can later specify which campuses that you're applying to. You'll also be able to monitor as you progress and what you've completed and reports that go on after this. And you'll also notice on the right, there's a help and support column that gives you tips that are specific to the page that you're on. So if you're stuck in one section and you're not sure what it means, typically there will be tips specifically for that subject on the right-hand side of the screen. So do keep that in mind. And I would also say, in addition to Education USA, of course, and myself, the Common App also has a whole set of resources to help you fill this out, so you have kind of support all the way around. The very first part of this application is just asking for your personal details, so your name, address, contact details. All of this is pretty straightforward. There are a few things that may be a bit more US specific, asking about visas and things like this. You don't necessarily need to know that information first. One thing I always want to remind students, as you're moving through this application, it will tell you which fields are required. So if you come to a section on, say, academics, and it's asking you what your cumulative GPA is, or what your class rank is, and if you don't have the answers to these questions, you don't necessarily have to complete them. These are things that will also be reported from your school. I mentioned previously that some universities offer fee waivers. The way to request this through the Common App is you'll see a whole long list of very specific things that could be a qualifier. For Ukrainian students, for most international students, it's this final point here that says you can provide a supporting statement from a school official. I know this sounds very technical. We don't need bank accounts or a long account of why you need this waiver. We just need someone from your school to click and approve this, to say yes, that you meet these qualifications. So you don't need to provide any additional information. You can just click yes, that you meet these criteria. And if you don't hear back from us, you can just assume that this has been approved already. The next section is the academics. So this is where we will ask you for information about your high school. There's actually a whole list of schools that you can search for. So when you open up that field, it will let you search for your school. We have a lot of schools, even Ukraine, we have a lot of schools already pre-populated. And I do encourage you to see if you can find that before typing it in on your own. There is a way to manually add a school. but we have a lot of schools in Ukraine, so please do search ahead of time. This will keep us from creating duplicates, and we can more easily match your application with the school that you're applying for. So do pay attention to that when you're applying this here. You can also include multiple schools. I know there are a lot of students, obviously, in Ukraine that have gone from school in Ukraine to somewhere else in the world. That's no problem at all. You can list that first school. And then you can also include additional schools. So explain when you moved and why you moved to the additional school. This is something that I'll be emphasizing throughout the presentation, but it's really important to provide context. If you have additional details of why you changed schools or anything that may have impacted, let's say you've got a scholarship to study at a very prestigious, technical school or something like that, do let us know why that happened, and just gives us a better idea of your application and this whole perspective on why you're applying to the university. So do provide us with those details. You'll also be able to provide academic honors, so things that you've achieved in school. So maybe for being the best biology student, or maybe participating in mathematical Olympiads or any of those other competitions. Those are things that we want to know about as well. So now I'll give tips about testing. I know this is a really big thing and can be really intimidating to learn that you have a whole other set of tests aside from the ones that you're required to do in school to show your academic ability in applying for university. For NYU, we are test flexible. So what this means is that there are a lot of different options that we accept. We have students from over 120 different countries. That means 120 different education systems and exams. And we really are dedicated to looking at students within their own local context. So we don't require one specific test. We really want to give you a chance to showcase what your abilities are by submitting a test that you feel best reflects your academic abilities. So if you are able to prepare for the SAT or ACT and get strong results in that, those are the tests that you can submit. Likewise, if you're in UK curriculum and you have A levels or IB exams or things like that, you're welcome to submit those. But we are also test optional. If you don't have access to those kinds of tests for whatever reason, you're not required to submit them, and your application won't be negatively marked because of that. So it's up to you to kind of marshal your best case, show us your best indicators of academic excellence. Other universities in the US will have different policies. There are some universities that do require very specifically the SAT, or will have some other kind of entrance exam, but this is something that you can find out in your research. I believe there's a website called fairtest.org where you can search universities that are test flexible or test optional in this way. So this is just one thing to be aware of, that there are a lot of different options out there. And also that none of these tests are tests that you can just go and take and automatically do well on. They're tests that you need to learn how to take. It takes practice to learn how to answer them and understand what kind of content will be on there. So you want to make sure that you do preparation for these exams. And again, this is something that Education USA can help you identify. One test that we do require, however, is an English language test. We are flexible here, and you can see that there are a number of different options that we accept. There's Duolingo, TOEFL, IELTS, Cambridge, those kinds of certificates. Again, we want to make sure that you're taking an exam that you're prepared for. So again, make sure that you do all of your research and you find the test that's the best fit for you, and that you prepare for that test. And I really want to emphasize this is really, really important, especially for NYU and very competitive universities. We want to see a high level of English. So do make sure, if you want to have a competitive application, that you prepare for these exams and that you have a strong English language exam result to boost your application. This is the section of the Common App where you can input these test scores. So you'll see here, it actually gives you a box where you can list all of the testing that you plan on applying, whether it's IB scores or English language exams. So this will just give us a heads up and will flag that we can expect to receive these scores from you. So you'll be able to input the scores informally here. So if you already know your SAT score or your TOEFL score, you can put that in here. And you will also eventually need to send official scores. This, again, will depend on the university. For NYU, we can accept unofficial scores in the beginning of the process. So if you are able to send the email, like a confirmation from the testing company, if you're not able to get the official score sent, that can be accepted. Ultimately, we do want and will expect the official scores to be sent. But just keep this in mind. A lot of the information that you're inputting in the Common App in your application is self-reported. So this means that you can input it and we can evaluate your application with it, but we will need to see the official certificate. Overall, in terms of this application, this is all on the honor system. So everything you put in here, from your extracurriculars, your grades, you're attesting that this is all true and you're reporting this honestly. And so we keep you to that promise. And ultimately, if you're admitted, we will want to see your admitted scores and all of this information. But I bring this up just because I know for a lot of students, maybe you're not able to access score reports, or there's some kind of cost that is difficult. So know that there is a little bit of flexibility on this in terms of getting important things. Likewise, for your extracurricular activities, which I'll talk about in a second, we don't need to see, official certificate from your ping pong competition in middle school or something like this. If you tell us that you were a champ and did this, and we trust you on the things that you're putting there. So just keep this in mind when you're putting together your application. So now I'll move on to the activity section, and specifically talking about these extracurricular and co-curricular activities. So the idea behind this is that these really help you stand out. These can show us that you're developing the skills that students need, and that you're involved in your community, and we can kind of get a little bit more insight into how you're invested in the things that you're studying and the things that are important to you, and how this will connect with you as a student on the community. We want to also see what you can potentially give, the university and contribute to the community in this way. So here's some quick tips for this. I would say overall, we're more interested in quality rather than quantity. I know a lot of times students kind of panic in the last year and join every club in school and try to have this long list of things that they've gone to. This honestly is not as impressive as having, quality extracurricular activities, things that you've done, that you've invested a solid amount of time into, and you have accomplishments to show for it. We want to see that you've been able to take on some kind of leadership role or accomplish something or create something in some way. That's much more interesting than just seeing a list of clubs that you just showed up to one time. So we are much more interested in this quality rather than the quantity. I also encourage you to start with the most important activity. So lead with your very best thing. There's space for up to 10 activities in this section. This is not a challenge to fill up all 10 of them by any means. If you have 10 activities, congratulations, that's amazing. But we're not expecting to see that many. So what I encourage students to do is lead with the thing that that's most important to you, that you feel most proud of. Have that as your first thing. And then as you go down, it can be a little bit less focused. So this is to say, maybe you play guitar and you just really enjoy playing the guitar. Maybe you weren't ever in a concert or won some kind of competition, but you just really enjoy doing that. By all means, you can share this, but maybe don't put it at the very top of your list. You can cluster activities and groups that are kind of relevant and related to each other. Also make sure this is clear for us, of course, avoiding typos and using acronyms, that we might not understand. Also be very specific with your descriptions. And also, as I mentioned before, if we just see your final year that's overloaded with all these activities, it's going to look like it's more quality than quantity. And I think I have an example here. So here is where you will input that information that I just mentioned. It gives you some ideas of the categories that you can be looking for. I really encourage you to keep an open mind in this. If you hear activities and think, in my life currently, there's just no way for me to actually do these activities. We don't have these sports. We're in the middle of this conflict, and these things aren't possible. I want to reassure you that that's not a negative thing for your application. Your application won't be impacted negatively by the things that you do not have access to. We just want to honestly hear about what you are doing outside of school, whether it is sports or additional academic interest, or even taking care of a little brother or sister, or doing work, or any of these other things. These all give us an idea into your character and your skills. So keep this in mind when you're choosing these activities. In fact, there's a section I'll show you where you can include that kind of information. But here you can actually see a couple example activities. So the first one is XYZ Club. We really don't know what it's about. And we see that the student just attended XYZ meetings. Not particularly compelling. There's nothing here. The student participated in just their year 10 of high school. That's not really going to impress universities very much. Whereas the second option, where we see a student was, a mentor at a science center, we can see that the students, they gave a really, concrete description of what they did there. They mentored students in research projects over the summer. They even got an award for being the best mentor. It looks like they've been doing this all 4 years of high school. That's really impressive. These are the kinds of things we want. So make sure that you're giving us this context. If we get a listing where it just says tennis, we'll think, okay, great, you played tennis once. That's not really impressive. But if it said, coached younger students and won these, competitions and did this and that, that's much richer. So make sure to provide us this context and let us know what it actually is you're accomplishing and doing in these clubs, and give us that extra information. This next section is for additional circumstances. So the things that I mentioned before, if you have, community disruptions, if you have family opportunities, if you work outside of school, if there are any of these other things that might not be what's considered a traditional, extracurricular activity, this is where you can give us that context. So make sure you do provide this kind of context for us. It's really helpful for universities to know. And next up is the writing section. This is another really big part of the application. As I mentioned before, this is something that not all universities, even in the US, not all universities ask for this, but it's something that really can share more information about who you are. So I like to describe this by telling you what this is not. So this is not an academic essay. This is not a paper that you would write for, a history class or something for school. It's also not a list of your extracurriculars. We don't need a summary of your activities again. We've just seen that in the previous section. It's also not a letter of motivation. Many universities do want to hear why you're applying to them. That's oftentimes a whole nother essay that they ask for. So that's information that's valuable, but that's not what the personal essay is about. It really should not be anything we can find elsewhere in your application. This really is a chance to share something new that we wouldn't be able to tell about you from the other parts of your application. It should also set you apart. I often ask students to imagine that your evil twin or doppelganger or someone else who did the exact same sports as you, got the exact same grades in class, went to the same school, had the same activities. You're both applying to the same university. And how are you going to set yourself apart from that person? What makes you unique? What makes you different? So this is something that comes into that essay. And it really should be interesting and unique and engaging and memorable, to really draw the reader into your story, and really give them an idea of who you are. I think these best essays are the ones that I can really imagine the student sitting across from me and having a conversation with them. I really get an idea of how they see the world, or I've kind of felt what they've experienced. These can be a really unique opportunity to pull your reader into your story and to really show them your world in this way. And my final tip here would just be that this should be a combination of both a good topic, so the thing that you're talking about, and also a great approach. These two things don't always necessarily line up. You may have something that sounds really exciting and is really important, but talk about it in kind of a dry, boring way that doesn't pull in the reader. Likewise, you might be able to find something that sounds like a boring and not particularly compelling topic, but talk about it in a way that brings out your personality and highlights things. So keep this in mind. It really should be both of these things. And I will mention that myself and also a lot of other universities and Education USA hold specific sessions on writing this essay. So if you're seeing this now and you're thinking, oh my gosh, this feels like a lot of work, I don't know how to do this, know that there are resources to go on and do this. So know that this is not a hard thing. It can be a little bit challenging, but definitely a rewarding thing to do. So if you feel kind of stuck at this point, know that there are people and resources out there to help you with this essay. And this is where it's located in the Common App. So you'll see there's a text box that you can enter this into. It also lists the questions themselves. Oftentimes there are multiple questions to choose from. So you can choose to submit it, or there are multiple responses. So you can choose the one that's the best fit for you. And finally, the recommender or recommenders for NYU, we just require one letter of recommendation. Some universities will require a specific combination. Typically, you will have one recommender who is in a counselor role. We know that often in Ukraine, schools don't have someone who's specifically like a university counselor or a careers coach, and that's completely fine. So no worries if you don't have someone who specifically has this job title. What we're looking for is someone who is officially employed by your school and can send official documents on your behalf. So things like your transcripts, any testing, information about the school, and just basically confirm your participation at the school. So they'll be asked to send, these transcripts and also potentially an evaluation. This person can send a letter of recommendation, but if you would prefer that the letter come from someone else, you have a number of different options. It can come from a teacher, so someone who's had you in the classroom and can speak to your academic abilities and accomplishments. Also, you can send a letter from someone outside of school. So if you have maybe a coach from football, or a boss at work, or a project that you volunteered on, really, in short, anyone who has good things to say about you that knows you well. This doesn't have to be someone who's right in your school or in your final year. If you have a teacher from the year before or something like that, that's completely fine. But just make sure that they do know you and have the time and ability to share this letter of recommendation. And do make sure you give them plenty of time to do this. Don't just wait until the deadline. This will be something I talk about a lot going on. But do make sure that they have the time to complete this, that they're willing to do this. And you can also send them what I call a brag sheet. You can put together a short summary and say, ask them first if they'll do this, and then say, by the way, here are all the things I've accomplished, or here are the things that I did in your class, and here's what I've accomplished since then, and here are my goals, just to give them a reminder and make it easier for them to write the letter. I would also emphasize that you should not send them a letter to write. We're very serious about this. I know in some places it can be common for people to say, oh, just write your letter and I'll sign it. For US universities, that's not okay. We do want your advisor or your recommender to write their own letter. But do feel free to provide the material that they can write that letter with, and to give them reminders about all of this. And this is the part in the Common App where you can monitor that information. So you'll see a button here that says Invite Recommenders. This is where you'll input their name and email address, and they will receive an email where they can log in to the other side of your application and submit these letters, or in the case of your counselor, other supporting documents. And you can actually monitor this here. So once you've sent it, you can see if they've accepted, and you can see if they've started or completed the different sections that they're required to complete. So if it's a recommender, you can see if they've submitted the letter yet. So all of that will be here in the recommenders section. And again, that's just the section where you can invite other recommenders. The next section that I'll talk about is the university-specific section. So the Common App is called the Common App for a reason. It's common to a big group of universities. So that means that you can write one application and send that same application to all of those universities. So you don't have to repeat this and make copies of all of these same lists of extracurriculars and so on, that you can just do that once and send it to all of these universities. But there are specific questions that each university has. So you'll need to go in and answer the questions that are nuanced or designed specifically for that university. For NYU, the big one here is which campus. We want to hear which campus you're applying to as your first choice. You can actually apply to multiple campuses. So you can say, if I'm not admitted to my first choice, I would like to be considered for a second or even a third campus. But I do want to make sure that you understand as students that that this is not just, ooh, check, 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 maybe I'll get into one of these campuses. This is a really serious decision, when we want to see that you're picking the campus that you feel you're a best fit for. and that you put that top choice first. So if you're thinking about multiple campuses, do make sure to have conversations with your teacher and with people from the university, just to make sure that that this really is a fit, that you're picking a campus that's a fit for you. We'll also ask a few other specific questions about academics and the testing that you're going to submit. There's also for NYU an optional essay where you can tell us about your interest in the university. Oftentimes other universities will have kind of a why us question, where they'll ask, why us out of the thousands of universities you're applying to? Why are you choosing to apply to us? And likewise, why you out of the tens of thousands who are applying, students who are applying to the university? What makes you a good fit for the university? So this is a place where that information can go in. So do make sure that you go in and monitor and make sure that this information is specific to the university and you're giving them that additional context. And finally, here are the deadlines. So this is kind of a confusing matrix of dates and decision deadlines. So I'll start with this simple thing here. The big difference that you'll see is that there are early decision deadlines and regular decision deadlines. The basic difference between these is if you apply early, you get your results early. So if you apply on November 1st, you find out by December 15th. If you apply January 1st, you find out by February 15th. But if you apply regular decision on January 5th, you find out in April. So it's a little bit more delayed. So the advantage of that is that, if you already know where you want to apply and you're prepared, you can kind of fast track it and, know where you're going to university. The other component of early decision is that it is a binding decision. What that means is you're making a promise to attend the university if you are offered a place. So it's your way of saying, this is my number one school, it's my dream school. If you have me here, I'm coming 100%. It lets admissions know that you're very serious and they can count on you to come if they admit you. And really, again, kind of advances that process. If you're not sure about that, then you can apply regular decision. If you still want to apply early and get your results early, but you're not ready to make that commitment, some universities have early action. NYU is not one of those schools, but there are some universities that will allow you to apply early and not commit to attending if you're admitted to the university. So that's just another thing to look out for. Sometimes there's restricted early action, which means you apply early and you're not bound to attend that university, but you're not allowed to apply early to any other schools. Really what it boils down to is that if you're applying early decision, you only do this to one school, because obviously you can only promise, one university that you're going to attend. So it's kind of like making this, arrangement for a date. You're not going to go out and, make multiple promises, multiple engagements across the board. So that's the idea behind early decision. For NYU, one thing I want to highlight, especially for NYU Abu-Dhabi, it is a very competitive process, and we tend to admit more than 50% of our class on the early decision deadlines. So this doesn't necessarily make it easier to be admitted if you apply early decision, but there are a lot more places available if you apply early decision. So if that's something that, if NYU Abu-Dhabi is your top choice, I really encourage you to apply early decision, just for, the ease of the process and, having more places available at that point. So again, this is up to you, and it's a decision or a conversation I'm happy to help students who are trying to weigh these different things. But overall, just note that this is not a simple decision. It's something that you really want to work on with either your counselor or Education USA or whoever's advising you, and figure out which one is going to be a fit for you. If you have an early decision school, or if you just want to apply regular decision, it's up to you. But keep in mind these deadlines. The other thing I want to highlight here, which I believe is my next slide, is talking about financial aid. So we also have a financial aid application, which is entirely different from the Common App. I won't get into it here because it's a whole nother thing to do, but also Education USA can help you with this. But there is a separate application for financial support. And I think I have that slide. Let me skip ahead briefly. I don't have the financial aid slide, but I'll talk about it anyway. So NYU and many other US institutions do have scholarships and financial aid for international students. This can come in many different formats and forms. Typically, there is need-based financial aid. That means financial support that is just based on your family's financial need. So how much additional money you need in order to enable you to attend the university. And then there's merit-based financial aid, which is based on some accomplishment. So being an amazing student overall, or being a fantastic swimmer, or being an amazing physics student, or having a really high grade. But those are amounts of financial aid, awards that are given for something you've done rather than your financial circumstances. It will really depend on the university that you're applying to, and often it's a mix of things that can be merit and need and all of these things. Some of them can come from the university, and some of them can be external. So there's a combination of those. But I just encourage you to explore these and do the research. Again, Education USA is a fantastic resource to figure out these kinds of things, ways to fund your US study. But just be aware that there are a lot of processes behind this, and you really need to spend time working on those applications and submitting them. I would say, especially for the CSS profile application for financial aid, this deadline is really firm. There's no flexibility here. So you really need to make sure that you submit all of these documents on time, because if you miss them, then unfortunately there won't be scholarships available for you. So all of these are very serious. I would say the Common App a little bit, especially, if there are circumstances that keep you from submitting on time. We can be a little bit flexible with submitting the application. Financial aid, unfortunately not. So just pay attention to all of these things. Deadlines are really important, and all the more reason to start early and get your application in early. The earlier you apply, the more buffer space you give yourself for completing other things, and just making sure that everything is there. I won't go off on a tangent, but oftentimes there's students who may submit something and are missing something that they really need, or maybe they want to improve, a test grade. And if they apply early, we can kind of flag that and help them make sure that they have a complete application. So the message here is not just on the deadline, but earlier, if you can get it in earlier. I did mention at the beginning that the final step in the process for the Abu-Dabí campus is the candidate weekend. This is a really unique part of the admissions process that has been there from the very first year of our campus, where we bring finalists to Abu-Dabí to see the campus themselves, to get to see the city, to have conversations with faculty, hang out with current students, and just really see if this is the right place for them. And it's also a chance for us to get to know them and see if they're right for us. So it really is this two-way evaluation. It is a required part of the process, but it's not a guarantee of admission. It is the final step. Not all students will be admitted. A large number of them will be admitted from the step, but it's not a guarantee of admission. But we do require you to attend if you're invited. So we will provide you, of course, with the plane tickets, the transportation, and the housing if you're coming from abroad to participate in this region or in this event. So my message is just make sure that you don't have anything going on, like a wedding or an important test on the dates of the candidate weekend, and that your passport is up to date so that you're able to travel at that point and participate, because this is a really special and memorable part of the NYU Abu-Dabí experience. And for some final tips, I think I've driven this first one home quite a bit. Give yourself enough time. Really start ahead of time so that you're not in a rush to gather, letters of recommendation and documents and things at the end. Really start with enough time to be able to give everything the attention that it needs and to make sure that everything is there. Also do your research in detail. I think you've seen so far all the questions that we're asking you and how important it is to be able to prepare yourself for that. So make sure that you know about these universities and why you're applying to them. Also, as I mentioned before, give your recommenders enough time to write a reference for you. Don't come to them like just a week before your application is due and ask them for that letter. As soon as you're sure that you'll be applying somewhere, it's good to give them a heads up and say, these are the places that I'm going to apply. This is what I've accomplished, and give them that context. Same thing goes with the essays. The essay is definitely not something that you write the night before your application is due. We really want you to spend the time to kind of do the self-evaluation and navel gazing that you need to kind of tell your story. I know, again, that this can be a really stressful thing, but I promise that that not only is it not hard, but it actually can and should be a fun thing to kind of think about who you are, what's important to you, and how you tell your story. This is something that, not just for applying for university, but for jobs and out in the world, the rest of your life, you're going to be telling people who you are, what's important to you, what your life experiences are, what makes you who you are. So to take this time now to do that reflection and to learn to do that is really important, and something that can help you know yourself better. So give yourself adequate time to work on those essays and make something that that reflects who you are. And deadlines, I know I've already said it a million times, but really, really important here. So those are my final tips to you. And here's the link to the Common App. Again, you can search for, if your university is not the Common App, there are other ones, but just know that that's the website. And finally, I'll go ahead and open up the floor for questions. I know I've been talking a lot now, so I want to hear from you, but I will say as my final statement here, and I speak on my behalf, the behalf of NYU, and I know Education USA and other US institutions, that this is just the beginning of the conversation. If this is something that you want to do, if this is something you're excited about, you can continue the conversation with us. Ask those questions, do your research. You know, we're not just anonymous people behind these universities. Our job is here to work with you and to help you succeed and make sure that you can submit your best application. So don't hesitate to be in touch with us, and that we really look forward to receiving your applications in the future.
Thank you, Justin, for such great presentation. Thank you for making it really practical with a lot of insights. I really appreciate this, and I'm totally sure that it was really useful for everyone who is watching us right now. And guys, now I encourage you to ask your questions. You can drop them in the chat, and we will have some time to answer them. While you are doing this, I believe that I have something important to highlight as an advisor here at Education USA, that there is also a possibility to invite your advisor to your Common App profile. So, for example, you sign up for the consultation with me or with my colleagues, we discuss the application process, all of its parts, and you can negotiate with us and kind of like, okay, can you check my Common App? Can you check my list of activities? How can I improve the wording or something like that? So there is an opportunity for you. It works kind of like the same, if I'm not mistaken, as for inviting recommenders. There is kind of like a button you can invite your advisor. And you have to sure that you enable the option for us advisors to look through your profile. So we would be happy to help, but it's a good idea to ask in advance, before your advisors. So I believe that it was important. It is important to mention. Okay, we are waiting for your questions. Again, I know that the topic is quite relevant now, because in 2 weeks you start, sending, in 2 weeks or more, sending your applications, and now it's a perfect time to work on completing Common App. And Justin, you have mentioned that there are plenty Common App resources that can be helpful for students. What are they, and where can they find these resources?
Sure. So the Common App website has, of course, their whole Q&A sections, but they also have specific training programs that you can go through. So there are whole presentations that you can walk through, and not just for students, but also for counselors and school officials. So if you have someone from your school who's not familiar with the process, or a recommender who's kind of struggling with this, there are, on the Common App website, you can actually go in and find presentations that address that and give them a walkthrough of what they'll be expected to complete. Okay, great, thank you. Because it's great that you have mentioned that there are also some guides for teachers, recommenders, and school representatives, because I know that in Ukraine it can be a huge problem, and my students kind of like sometimes complain, oh my gosh, we don't know how to do something. Just for you guys, you can send them the link, kind of like the guide how to do this, the guide how to do that. Or just help them a little bit with the technical part, of course. Do not do anything instead of them. Right.
Okay.
That's a great point. I would just add on too, like if you do feel like you're missing support or something, or your teachers feel really challenged by this and it's something that they're not able to do, that this doesn't have to all fall on you as well. As you mentioned, all this Common App and also the universities can help with this process. So just kind of sharing that same support.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, for now, I do not see any questions in the chat. I believe that's because the presentation was pretty clear. Everything was presented step by step. So I think that no one is feeling confused right now. So thank you, Justin. Thank you, all our students. Yeah, just have a great rest of your day, and do not forget to reach out to Education USA and New York, Abu-Dabі if you need any guidance from us. Thank you. Bye.
Great. Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.